A shocking targeted murder in the streets of New York City. United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was in New York for a big investor meeting. The meeting was scheduled to begin at 8 a.m. at the Hilton Hotel. He arrived an hour and 15 minutes before the meeting, but never made it inside because his killer got there 5 minutes earlier and shot and killed him. That suspect quickly left the city but was arrested 6 days later in Altoona, Pennsylvania at a McDonald's. The suspect's name is Luigi Mangione, and he is facing second-degree murder in New York. But many are asking, why not first degree? And how much time is he really facing? Tonight, our New York legal insider has the answers. Meanwhile, in Florida, a woman is on the phone with her health insurance carrier and utters these words: delay, deny, depose. You people are next. And now she's been arrested. Did she break the law? We break it down as our in-depth coverage of the United Healthcare CEO murder continues.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Great to have you aboard on this Friday the 13th. Trust me, nothing is going to go wrong tonight. You can bank on it. All right, let's begin with what happened in New York. Brian Thompson was murdered on video. We see the whole thing. We see the man come up from behind. We see him take the stance. We see him fire his weapon and then approach him again, firing again and again, making sure that he takes the life of Brian Thompson. We know that person was there 5 minutes ahead of time. Crystal clear. This was planned, plotted, and targeted. There's no doubt, because we can see it with our own eyes. It's called direct evidence. He was caught on video. He was caught on video all over the place. They're tracking him, they're tracking the killer, they put them together. This is a very, very solid case. Because this guy took his mask down because he had to flirt for just that moment. Now, he was caught with a weapon and some hash browns, okay? He's got the weapon. They say it matches. So if you've got the weapon on the guy, you got the guy on the video, you've got the killing on video, you put it all together. This is like the most solid case you could have. They're also testing some DNA. We don't have the results of that yet. They have a fingerprint as well. Yet, we're sitting here tonight, and Luigi Mangione is charged with second-degree murder? It's got a lot of folks scratching their heads around the country. So we're going to get to the bottom of it for you tonight. And by the time you hear everything we have to say, I think it will make some sense to you. Because, you know, here at Court TV, we cover trials across the country. And I think in almost every state that you would go to, this would either be first-degree murder or whatever the top murder charge is in that jurisdiction. But we aren't there. We're in New York. Take a look. The governor of New York speaking out. This is from an interview with MSNBC, Governor Kathy Hochul. I want to get him back here in the state of New York and run him through our criminal justice system, because that horrific attack occurred on our streets, and the people of our city deserve to have that sense of calm that this perpetrator has been caught and he will never see the light of day again if there is justice. You cannot assassinate an individual on the streets of New York, not now, not ever. And we are getting word that prosecutors began presenting their case to a grand jury yesterday. So you've got that taking place. You've got the steps towards extradition, because he's in Pennsylvania, he's not in New York. You can't just send him there. You've got to go through all the legal hoops to get him from one state to the next. So let's bring in our guest who's going to help us work through all of this, all of the steps of extradition. Former senior homicide prosecutor in New York, founder of Villolona Law, Bernardo Villolona is with us. Bernardo, thanks so much for joining us. I wanted to bring you in first here as a New York homicide prosecutor so we can straighten everything out for folks across the country tonight. Let's begin with the extradition. I want to put that back up on the screen because the Manhattan District Attorney's Office filing an indictment. They want to make sure this indictment is ironclad. How about that process, just getting an indictment in this, Bernarda? How involved is that? How much evidence do you need, and what makes it ironclad?
When you're talking about presenting a case to the grand jury, the burden is different than if you're presented it at trial. At trial, you have to prove the person's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In a grand jury presentation, you just have to prove that there's probable cause to believe that this person committed a crime and the elements of the crime itself. And you're presenting it to members of 16, and out of those 16, there has to be a majority vote of 12 as to whatever charges that the prosecutor presents. So it's not difficult to get a grand jury to vote for an indictment in New York County or in New York in general. So the prosecutors are going to present the bare minimum in order to get an indictment, but an indictment that is strong enough to withhold any type of scrutiny since we're dealing with the extradition process. But the defendant's not going to be present. He's not required to be present. He's not required to testify. There's no judge in this presentation, and the defense attorney is not in this presentation. This presentation is strictly led by the prosecutor that's presenting witnesses to this grand jury that is supposed to be a secret proceeding.
And how long should it take? I mean, people hear about grand juries all the time. Some grand jury, sits for weeks or months at a time. When I was a prosecutor, there were times where someone could get indicted in 6 minutes. Maybe not for murder, but you could. So what are we talking about in New York for a case like this? How long should it take to get that indictment?
So, Vinnie, I was a prosecutor for 13 years in New York and actually a prosecutor in Pennsylvania for 3 years. So in terms of presenting a case to a grand jury, a homicide, I presented dozens of homicide presentations to a grand jury, and literally you can get an indictment in a matter of hours depending on how much testimony that you present to that grand jury. In a case like this, because it is circumstantial, you're putting on more witnesses than you normally would. Because in a normal presentation, you'll present an eyewitness, you're putting the autopsy, the certificate of death, you're putting the first officer to identify the person that died, and you're putting an officer that conducted the arrest of the perpetrator that is the lead for that indictment. But in a case like this, since it's so circumstantial, you're going to put the detective on, and you're going to put all that video in, a lot of video in, because remember, it's like crumbs. You're trying to tie all of this together because remember, you have that initial video of the actual shooting. From there, you're tracking his body, his clothing from place to place where he's on a bike, and then he goes into the park, and from the park, he exits the park. From when he exits the park, and then they lose him, but then he gets into a taxi cab. Then you have his face inside of that taxi cab. Then you have the photograph of him in Starbucks. And then, of course, that infamous video where he actually pulls down his mask at that hostel. Also, you'll put in the testimony of the items that were recovered by the scene, which was that bottle as well as a wrapper. And now it's come back that the fingerprint of the defendant matches that's on that bottle. So you have that, and then of course, the arrest in Pennsylvania, because from that arrest, what they recovered, more importantly, was the gun. And that gun now matches the shell casings that were on that scene. So you're talking about a one-day presentation, a 1 or 2 day presentation, but it doesn't take long to get an indictment in this case.
I think you just could have gotten one in 1:45 seconds right there. You covered almost every piece of evidence that we've heard about. Now, the big question that everyone's wondering about, why is this a second-degree charge? If we were in most states, it would be first-degree premeditated murder or malice murder. Why is this second-degree in New York?
So interesting enough, and Vinnie, we've covered homicide cases pretty much from all around the country. When you look at the murder and the second degree charge here in New York, it's actually similar to the first degree murder charges across the country. Now, when it comes to murder and first degree in New York, it only applies to a narrow list of aggravating circumstances, including when the victim is a judge or a police officer or a first responder or a witness of a crime and its retaliation, or when the killing involves a murder for hire, but maybe in this case, when there's an intent to commit terrorism. That's what qualifies murder in the first degree. Murder in the second degree is when a person intends to cause the death of another individual and causes the death of that individual. Premeditation is not required. Murder in the second degree, the minimum is 15 years to life, maximum 25 years to life. So the majority of cases here in New York, the highest charge is usually murder in the second degree. You rarely ever see a murder in the first degree charge in New York.
Okay, you did say one thing that scared me and made everyone else shudder. 15 years to life, 15 years for life for what we saw on the video. So explain to me in real terms, like how much time does someone with no criminal record who commits this act on video, if he gets convicted of second-degree murder, how much time is he really going to end up spending behind bars in New York?
In this case, Vinnie, I'll be honest, having done hundreds of sentencings here in New York, a judge will give this man the maximum of 25 years to life because this is not your typical murder in the second degree. So despite him not having a criminal record, because it was premeditated, because it was callous, because it was so much planning involved and it was so egregious, a judge will max out this defendant if he is found guilty. And the reality is that it's 25 years to life, but then 25 years, that's when he first goes in front of the parole board. Highly unlikely the first, the second, the third, the fourth time that he goes in front of a parole board, he's not going to be granted parole. But we also have to think that this man is young. He's 26 years old.
Yeah, I don't trust parole boards. You know, his first time up, he'll be 51, a kid.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. He's young.
A kid. Mm-hmm. All right, let's bring in the rest of our think tank tonight. Joining us, Chief Public Defender for Oakland County, Michigan. She represented the Oxford High School shooter. Paulette Lofton is with us. And defense attorney, former head prosecutor. He's out of New Jersey. He's been dodging drones all week. Bob Bianchi is with us. All right, great to see everyone. All right, I'll start with you, Paulette. What will this case look like? And when I say that, I mean, I don't know if this is going to be a trial. I don't know if there's going to be pre-trial. I don't know what's going to happen. From your perspective, knowing what we know at this point, what do you think is going to develop here? What are going to be the issues? And I think a lot of times what the case looks like depends upon the course that the defense takes, right? How they approach it. What are your thoughts based on all of this evidence that Bernarda outlined?
Sure, as Bernarda said, a lot of it is circumstantial evidence until the officers arrest him in Pennsylvania and they find the murder weapon. It matches the casings, and then he has this lengthy manifesto. I've had cases with these manifestos. It is a jury really, really looks at those. So does a court, so does the judge, because that is the inner thinking of someone, what they thought about before they carried out this master plan. So, I can tell from the interviews that have been done so far with his attorney that they will probably fight extradition. It remains to be seen exactly what happens when he is actually brought to New York, whether or not he'll go to trial. But it does seem like the evidence that is coming in, adds a lot of strength to the prosecutor's case here. And I do think the charge could definitely be increased to the first degree. I've dealt with cases with terrorism, and I think this is one. I mean, terrorism is a killing done in pursuit of political or ideological goals, and I think that's exactly what we have here.
All right, Bob Bianchi, do you expect, let's go into the presumption that there is a trial, right? Do you think a defense lawyer will get up in front of 12 New Yorkers and say, ladies and gentlemen, they don't have the evidence here. What do they have? A fingerprint, DNA, a video, a manifesto? They don't have the evidence here. Or is there going to be some other approach here? Is this going to be about something other than somebody else did it?
So Vinnie, as a former homicide prosecutor, the way I analyze this case when I used to try murder cases is I do exactly what you just asked. I'm thinking about my summation. What do I want to be saying in my summation? And what am I anticipating the defense is going to do? And I start right now in the beginning knocking down that defense. In my opinion, the defense here is going to be some sort of mental health defense. Now, there are two things that could occur. It could be an insanity defense, or it could be a what we call diminished capacity defense. Each of those things has certain elements that are read to the jury that if the person was suffering under a mental illness, essentially, that deprive them of their ability to be able to reason or know the difference between right or wrong, they can be found not guilty by reason of insanity. However, as a prosecutor, this manifesto and all the evidence that Bernardo did such a great job at detailing shows such premeditation, such intent, making a distinction between killing him and not using an explosive to harm other people shows reason and deliberation. The next piece, Vinnie, last point that I'm thinking and I'm concerned about as a prosecutor is what I'm seeing in the social media posts here. I'm a little worried about jury nullification. One juror hates the health industry and somehow looks at this guy as some sort of hero. So I'm already crafting my arguments to talk about when people take the law into their own hands, the entire society is deprecated because we are a nation of laws. And if we start going out and killing people who have differing views from ourselves, we can't exist as a society. So that's where I'm at right now as a prosecutor, as I'm constructing my case. I'm preparing already for my summation.
I want to put up on the screen because the video evidence in this is so compelling, and what they've been able to get so far, and then what we've seen that's been made public in the pursuit of this alleged killer. I mean, you start with the hostel where that's the only moment through all of this that he brought that mask down that was found on video. Then you've got him at Starbucks. Then you've got someone with a similar backpack committing the crime, someone with the backpack on the bicycle, then someone exiting Central Park without the backpack that was found in Central Park, and then someone getting out of the city, jumping in that cab. You put it all together, it makes sense. Bernardo, let's talk about that first degree potential here, the terrorism. Who makes that call? Who is going to make that decision? Is that going to be like the top prosecutor says, listen, we want to go for first degree here? Do they just put things in front of a grand jury and let them decide? Or is somebody steering that if they decide to go and attempt to get a first degree charge here?
Best believe, Vinnie, that in a high-profile case of this magnitude, District Attorney Alvin Bragg is the one who's going to make this decision, have the conversation with the lead assistant district attorney that's presenting the case to the grand jury as to whether they will present the charge of terrorism. What I think may happen, it's possible either one, they have a long-term grand jury that who knows whether they stay for 4 weeks or even longer, or two, if they're presented in the regular short-term grand jury, they'll move forward with the murder in the second degree, have the case continue on, and if they find additional evidence that they think can sustain a guilty verdict on murder in the first degree having to deal with terrorism, then they'll present it in front of the grand jury. So remember, this investigation is ongoing. They're about to do a deep dive on his social media, and they're also trying to get into the phone that was left by the scene.
Now, Paulette, the other thing that we saw when the first opportunity, we're looking at the image right now, the first opportunity he had in front of the public, we saw him appear unhinged in the way he was acting and what he was saying. What are your thoughts about that and who he is? Does he need or will he be evaluated? Is that automatic, or is that going to be the call by one of his attorneys?
So it's not automatic. Usually the defense attorney makes the request for competency. I think due to the nature of this case, the fact his background, no criminal history, a very good upbringing from what it looks like, a lot of education at very good schools. And I think the defense attorney would be making the right call by having him at least screened. But I agree, that first image that society has watching him after his arrest, he does look unhinged. So if that's true and he really is suffering mental health issues, then definitely I think that's a defense that his team is going to go with.
Bob, the other thing is we've heard that he seemingly went off the grid, like at least in the last 3 months, and was estranged from his family, the family that has millions and millions of dollars, and was suffering perhaps from some extreme back pain. What are your thoughts about him perhaps having some sort of a mental breakdown?
Yeah, Vinnie, that's why we talked about this before. This is my main concern, but the law is very specific. Look, lots of people have back pain. Lots of people have terrible circumstances. Lots of people are debilitated, paralyzed, have lots of reasons. It's not a justification or excuse to commit a murder. And I agree, as the prosecutor, the person who used to make these calls, I would definitely charge terrorism here. It's clearly in the case already. And specifically with regard to all of the opportunities he had in that manifesto and in his writings, and what I'm sure is going to come out in the electronic record, he has been planning and plotting this for a long period of time. And significantly, as far as the law is concerned, so long as you knew the difference between right or wrong, you're not going to be able to avail yourself to those mental health defenses, regardless of how sick you were. We just can't let people who were sick and injured go on the street and assassinate CEOs.
Our think tank is locked and loaded tonight, folks. Wow. All right, they're going to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about the public reaction and how it is manifesting itself into another case, a criminal case. Plus, coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, we head back to the low country of South Carolina. A huge development in the Alec Murdaugh double murder case as the defense files their appeal. Do they have any chance? We investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV with Insurify.
People who keep wondering why we regard Luigi Mangione as a hero, we don't. We see him as the symbol he is in a time that he's needed.
I mean, this guy basically became the modern day Martin Luther King. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's statues of him in the near future.
I guarantee you that no other CEO is going to want to be in this position. And they understand the fact that Luigi has opened a path, a way that many others might want to explore.
This whole corporate capitalist takedown is just, oh my God.
Unreal reaction on social media, TikTok, it's all over the place. People praising the accused assassin. That's what he's accused of doing. That was an assassination. Now, since the shooting, wanted posters with the faces of other healthcare CEOs have been popping up in New York City. One even had Brian Thompson's face on it, but crossed out. Video of the posters was uploaded to TikTok by Barbecue Lady.
Do you see this? Deny, defend, oppose at the bottom of it?
So now I want to show you another photo of another face. Take a look. Meet Briana Boston. That's her mugshot. Why does she have a mugshot? Here's the information from her arrest. Briana Boston, 42 years old, was arrested at her Lakeland, Florida home on Tuesday after allegedly making threats on a call to BlueCross BlueShield regarding the denial of a recent medical insurance claim. Boston, that's her name, ended the recorded conversation with the company rep by saying, quote, delay, deny, depose, you people are next. This mother of three told police that healthcare companies played games and deserved karma from the world because they are evil. The judge set Boston's bail at $100,000, calling it appropriate considering the status of our country at this point. Let's get back to our think tank, Bernardo Villolona, Paulette Lofton, and Bob Bianchi. Bob, those words, delay, deny, depose, you people are next. Is that a crime?
Vinnie, listen, I'm no shrinking violet. I've never pled a murder case in my entire career. I tried them all. But we have a First Amendment too, and this is where I got a little bit of a problem here. Usually speech is protected unless it's criminalized, and it's usually criminalized if it's a legitimate threat that can be carried out, number one, or number two, if it's done with the purpose, the intention to harass another person, as opposed to somebody who's just angry, agitated, their claim got denied, $100,000 bail being set for this woman, I think, is an outrage. It's an over-abuse. It's excessive. And it's a judge reacting to using bail as what's going on in the country as opposed to the individual circumstances of the case. Sorry, on this one, I have to say, we got to be careful that we don't overreact and start criminalizing speech.
Paulette Lofton, delay, deny, depose. You people are next.
Yes, that's a little scary. Obviously, you know, everyone is afraid of copycats. It happens sometimes after a very, very public crime is committed. So obviously, I'm sure the individual that was on the phone and heard those words was fearful because this literally just happened in such a brutal way. But I agree with Bob. I think that bond is a little high, especially after the police were able to investigate. This person did not have weapons. This person didn't have a criminal history, had no ability to carry out the threats that she was making. So I do think we have to be a little bit careful. I know the fear, but also we got to be realistic here.
Bernarda, right now, you know, insurance companies, when you're getting a claim denied, you're in a desperate situation. You either need something to be paid for, it could run you into bankruptcy, or perhaps you're being denied the ability to get a procedure because you can't afford it on your own and they won't do it without insurance covering it for you. So I understand the frustrations. So how this is now manifesting itself, your thoughts about this case, but also some of those reactions on social media from people who seem to be thinking that violence is somehow justified at this point.
So, Vinnie, let's just be clear. Violence is not the answer. You know, I understand that we all have our feelings. Hey, I don't like the healthcare industry. I don't like health insurance. I think it's a big money grab. They don't really protect us, don't serve us. But anyway, aside from that, in terms of this specific case, I think that the judge was sending a message by setting that bail so high. Because even if in New York, if that person would have made the same threat, it would have been a misdemeanor. Maybe harassment, maybe menacing, maybe terroristic threats, but a misdemeanor, but none requiring a $100,000 bail. But I think with this judge is that he definitely wanted to send a message to everyone. Now, on a side note, when we're dealing with what's going on social media and with people reacting and voicing their concern, hey, we are frustrated. People are frustrated. And health insurance is so expensive. And even if you're paying over $1,000 for health insurance, you're paying a high deductible. You're paying a high deductible and you still don't have certain medical procedures covered. So I understand the frustration, but again, violence is not the way. But I hope at least that we do get one good thing out of this case, and that is to bring an awareness to the healthcare industry and a wake-up call to all these healthcare industry and CEOs that they need to pony up and take care of this health crisis that we have.
Bob, so where's the line on social media? Because people are venting, right? So we know the First Amendment is strong. I mean, it's super strong, and it needs to be. But when can someone go too far on social media? When does it cross over from speech, anger, statement to a crime or potential crime?
Great question, Vinny. We deal with this all the time in our criminal defense practice. It is essentially when somebody is harassing communications, which is with the purpose to annoy or alarm another person. Many times people are saying something in the heat of passion, and their purpose isn't to annoy or agitate or put somebody in fear, but rather they're angry and they're just expressing themselves. So that's where the legal line is. If a person is doing it for the purposes of intimidating another person or threatening another person, that's where it crosses over the line to become illegal. But I'll tell you, prosecutors would be smart in this particular case to listen to what Bernarda is saying and look at the social media posts here, because this is your potential jury pool that is going to be listening to this case. And it only takes one to hang a jury, Vinny. And what those jurors need to know and the public needs to understand is that we all represent something. Every one of us, you and all of your guests here and myself and everyone on these posts, we all have something that somebody disagrees with us, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, pro-immigration, against immigration, LGBTQ or not. And you just can't go out and start assassinating the people whose opinions you disagree with, or the entire society falls apart.
All right, folks, we'll continue to cover this.